Welcome, everybody. It's right at 11. We're going to give it another minute. We see some people coming on quickly. We getting close to 100 people are joining us today. That's great. Beautiful sunny day to talk about solar. Okay. Well, let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to Solar Energy for Commercial Properties, Now or Never. We'll explain why that is. With the Inflation Reduction Act has really brought back the demand and the ROI for solar. My name's Rob Cornaran, CEO of Advanced Family of Businesses. We have Advanced Roofing, Advanced Green Technologies, and Advanced Air Systems. My background is I grew up in Long Island. I started working in high school as a roofing contractor. I did that through high school and college, and my boss had me open a branch in Atlanta, Georgia, moved me to Florida in 1982, and I started Advanced Roofing in 83, 40 years ago. In 1994, we purchased an air conditioning company. We saw a need for having one company do the AC, air conditioning and roofing, because all the roofing air conditioning was up on the roof. And then in 2006, we saw the solar business coming along, and we made a deal with the largest thin film manufacturer to be their distributor and installer. So that's when we got into solar in 2006. And then we have grown both businesses to be the largest commercial rooftop in the state of Florida, as well as the largest commercial rooftop and carport in the state as well. So today we're going to learn a lot about the solar. We also have some other webinars coming up. We have rooftop safety, roof asset management technologies, advanced access tips, and top 10 things property managers need to know. And then the last one, getting ready for hurricane season, is hurricane season preparedness. I'd like everybody to stick on till the end, because we do have a raffle announcement for some ad tags that are really handy to put in your luggage or wherever. It could tag it to your kid so you know where he's at, or whatever you want to use it for. So I'd like to introduce Clint Sockman. Clint came to us, the Advanced family, about 19 years ago. He grew up in the roofing industry just like I did, and started when he was 16 in a family business, and came down and started as a project manager. And he just worked himself up all the way through to a partner today. And he's very knowledgeable in both roofing. He handles roofing and solar. And he carries the license, the state of Florida, for roofing, general contracting, and solar contracting license for us as well. And we have several qualifiers, including myself, that has that as well. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Clint, and you're going to get a very informative seminar on solar. So take it away, Clint.
Thank you, Rob. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Looking forward to having a quick talk. Like Rob said, Clint Sockman, Executive Vice President of Advanced Green Technologies. A little bit about AGT. Like Rob mentioned, we were founded back in 2005. We're a vertically integrated solar contractor, corporate headquarters in Fort Lauderdale, but we really work out of all 7 of our offices. We have 2 PEs on staff. We're vertical as far as we own our own electrical installation company. We perform all of our own mechanical installations. So we're really a diverse background. Not only that, but we do practice what we preach. We have solar on 4 of our 7 facilities that we own. We have a fleet of electric and hybrid vehicles throughout the company. And we really believe in the green movement that's going on out there. Next slide. Learning objectives today. We're going to talk about the legislative changes. It's been over a full year now, almost a year and a half since the IRA was implemented. And Matt's going to touch on, what that means for you. Utility changes and what's driving our cost escalation in your bills, technologies and how we're deploying them into the marketplace, the risks of rooftop solar, or the perceived risks, and how we can mitigate and manage those concerns. And then, how to get started, what the financial impacts are, how to do a feasibility study, how we take on a design project through our engineering division. So how, really an introduction to solar photovoltaics and how solar is put out into the marketplace. Here in Florida in the C&I space, we really have 2 typical situations. We have a grid type situation where we're producing solar energy and it's running in parallel with the utility grid. So what does that mean? We produce solar energy on the top of the rooftop. That's DC power. Comes down through the electrical infrastructure to an inverter where we convert it to AC power, which is matching what your building is consuming. And your building consumes the energy from the solar as its first source of power. And if for any time they ever need the electrical grid for more power, they're able to take that at the same time. And that's why we call it parallel operation, where we can actually consume solar energy and utility power at the same time. And the flip side is true. If you ever have excess, we actually are able to send that back out through the meter and onto the utility grid, where you get a credit here in Florida under our net metering program. The second type of solar application out there now involves batteries, and we consider that to be a microgrid or a battery backup grid. In its base functionality, the solar still works the same way, where we're able to consume our solar energy, use the utility power, but then we also have this ability to dispatch batteries to either do things like demand management, where we're cutting off peaks of our consumption and avoiding demand charges from our utility partners. Or in a true microgrid sense, if the grid was to fail, we're able to create or form our own grid, what we call grid forming through our batteries, and power our building exclusively through batteries with the utility isolated, similar to a generator where we actually shut the utility off completely. We isolate ourselves from the utility and we create our own grid. So we're going to talk about all of these deployments and how they're going out next. First thing on deck is the microgrid and battery energy storage. We're at a unique point in time right now where there's an enormous amount of investment going into batteries, and we're expecting this kind of J curve for cost driving as efficiencies come up in manufacturing, demand continues to increase for car battery storage, and technologies get better, much like computers and laptops and high definition televisions. They all follow this J curve where cost starts high as innovation is happening, and as development and the market establishes, it's going to come down. How does a battery energy storage system and or a microgrid work? We really have the ability to take in multiple power sources into a central controller and then dispatch those resources from a coordinated effort and use them either all at one time or individually. So right now we're deploying 7 microgrid sites for the Seminole Tribe of Florida on 2 of their reservations. And in this instance, we have a central controller, our microgrid controller, and we're actually using 4 independent power sources. We have solar power at any given time, utility power from their provider at any given time, a generator power, and then our battery power. So in its normal function, our solar and our batteries are what we call grid following mode, and they're actually tracking the utility grid. And as power starts to rise to a certain level, we will send in batteries to stop it from doing that. And then at the same time, if the solar is able to provide power for the whole building without the utility, we'll actually charge our batteries with that excess power. And so that is our grid following mode. But in the event that they have an outage, and these reservations are in remote areas where they often have power glitches and outages, our batteries are actually able to disconnect from the utility grid and create what we call that grid forming mode, powering the entire facilities for up to 4 hours. Assuming there was no solar energy whatsoever, or really an unlimited time if there is solar energy where we're able to use solar and battery simultaneously. And if in the event that either of those things fail or we run out of solar, the generators then come on and can run the building and charge the batteries, and then we go back to running batteries. So there's this constant ebb and flow and metering. And it does a lot to provide grid stability, obviously that backup power and demand peak shaving for the tribe. So it's a unique project. We're just finalizing the first 4 buildings, getting ready to start on the next 3. It's super exciting. So next. Rooftop solar. This is our bread and butter. Like Rob mentioned, when we started AGT back in 2005, we were distributing solar products, but advanced roofing and advanced green technologies in my division on the construction side was always focused on putting out rooftop solar. And right here on these pictures, we're kind of seeing a plethora of deployments, anywhere from flat roofing, low slope roofing, that would be like membrane roofs, TPOs, PVCs, EPDMs or modified bitumens, top left, to your standing seam metal roofs in the center, or pre-engineered metal buildings on the bottom right. This is a easily deployable underappreciated, rooftop asset space that's not being used for anything else. And as long as we have age alignment, this is often the most cost-effective way to deploy solar. Meaning, if we don't need to replace a roof or make substantial upgrades to have the term of the solar asset line up to the term of the roof, we're able to put these rooftop, solar arrays down anywhere from $1.75 to $2 a watt, yielding us really preferential returns when combined with these tax credits that we're going to talk about. Diverse, low cost, easily accessible, and really it's our primary driver from a volume standpoint for our solar business, rooftop solar. Next, please. Carports and parking garages. Um, and then I really like to split carports and parking garages into kind of our standard parking lot and then our purpose-built canopies and shade covers. And they come in a variety of offerings. We kind of call the top left picture a bare bones industrial carport, right? It's very much serving as a shade cover and as a structure for solar deployment, ranging all the way working to the right side of the page to our highly architectural features like split columns, rain decking, and water management. And then we also are getting more and more into purpose-built canopies as well. Right now, we're working on some interesting projects where we're creating grandstand coverings on pickleball courts out of solar canopies. The picture on the top right is actually a private racetrack club in Miami that they park their race cars under after they come off the track. It's powering the building for the concession stand and the club. And then you also have these widespread applications. Um, Oftentimes, people have sensitive manufacturing. Maybe the roof doesn't line up with the warranty time frames. Maybe it's just not a good candidate because of shading, and you have the ability to deploy a lot more solar than you might in other places. The center overhead is actually 2 megawatts of solar on a Verizon headquarters in Lake Mary. And, as you can tell, you're getting 5x more solar by using the parking lot than they would have been able to use in the rooftop application. So we often look to carports to provide scale, to stay away from a building, whether it's because of, roof needs or expansion needs. Now they come with some additional cost, maybe 50% cost increase in some circumstances to deploy all of this steel infrastructure and underground, concrete foundations. So returns come down, but still preferential and obviously still able to be done. Next, please. Moving into ground-mounted solar, oftentimes in our home market here in Florida, real estate is a premium, but we do run across the ability to find parcels of land and unused property where we can deploy ground-mounted assets. We can do them in ballasted situations like you see on the far right. That's John Lloyd State Park, which we did in conjunction with the state of Florida. Or driven pile situations like this water treatment plant on the left, where we're driving steel piles into the ground on a predetermined depth to overcome the wind speeds. So if you have the land asset, by all means, ground mounted is an efficient way to put it out, but limited use cases in the CNI area. If anybody's driven through the center part of the state or paid attention to a plane ride as you're heading to another part of the country, you will notice that the utility scale folks are putting on enormous amounts of ground mounted solar throughout the central part of the state, offsetting some of those peak demand loads that they might have. Instead of building gas power plants, they're building solar power plants. Next. Photovoltaics, floating solar is absolutely a thing, and it's gaining steam in a place like Florida where we do have a lot of natural lakes and waterways. We're seeing floating solar being deployed. We're bidding on projects more frequently than we ever have. And you're looking at some installations that may be familiar. Florida Power and Light has installed one here at Miami-Dade County, right outside the airport, and we actually maintain that. It's a lot of interesting PPE and safety protocols to put our men in boats and life rafts and working on electricity, but it has to be maintained just the same way as any other solar asset does. It comes with a lot of permitting hurdles, but nothing that can't be overworked, and some unique engineering to anchor the shoreline anchors. and to get the power systems to shore as well. And some unique marketing opportunities. I touched on this briefly in our carport division because we are able to give our carports in an architectural fashion as well. But architectural solar in the purest sense is something that's happening. We just finished a large 1 megawatt rooftop for KPMG in their training facility headquarters in the Orlando area. And it was all rooftop, and most of it was out of sight from the constituents. And they said, "What can we do?" And they actually deployed one of these solar flowers, the picture on the top right, to bring solar to ground level. And that's often what architectural solar does: is puts the vision in front of people that you might not see with rooftop solar, or sometimes even your parking garages. These trees and flowers are enormous, as you can tell. There's a group of gentlemen sitting there in front of the solar trees from Spotlight Solar in the middle. They're 20-foot tall masts. That solar flower is actually an 18-foot tall radius. And so until you see that in person, it's hard to understand the scale, but they're imposing and impressive features. The solar flower actually tracks the sun in both its daily movements and seasonal movements. It's also very smart from a technology standpoint. There's wind speed meters on it. It collapses or, kind of folds up in the morning, and then it blooms when the sun comes out. But a lot of interesting features. We're talking about pergolas, more and more options to waterproof solar panels and still see the cells in the marketplace right now. So bringing architectural solar down to covered areas for lunch breaks or restaurant areas, grandstand coverings, high-end architecturally finished carports like you see at the Chevrolet dealership, is really bringing solar into the mainstream. So with that, time for a quick poll. Will a grid-tied solar system provide backup power in the event of a power outage without batteries? That's a good qualifier. So we're getting some responses in, pretty educated group of folks here. 87% no, 13% yes. Yeah, and like I said, that is generally a no, and without being set up to disconnect from the utility grid and function in a standalone mode. So that's a special design that's going to require some batteries or another grid forming device. So everybody's spot on there. 82% have it as a no. With that, I am going to turn it over to Matt Jeffries, Director of Sales and Strategic Accounts here at AGT. Matt is a go-to for all of our clients here, putting together some of the most intricate financial packages and sales packages that we do, and he's a plethora of knowledge when it comes to incentives and rates, dealing with it every day. So, Matt, it's all yours.
Thank you, Clint, and welcome everyone. I always tell people that solar is my day job, but funding my fishing habit is really the reason that I even have a day job. And I guess being the one that put the slide deck together also comes with some fringe benefits of getting to throw some fishing pictures in there. But as we move through this deck today, and if you joined our solar webinar or any of them last year, you'll notice we're going to revisit some of the basics again in this presentation. But we're also going to dive deeper into a few market dynamics that have recently changed. You may have noticed that this year's presentation is titled Now or Never. And it's kind of ironic. If you worked with me in the past, you may have been surprised to hear me say, even at some point, what I think, maybe you should hang tight for a couple months, or hey, let's let these prices settle a little bit and move when the time's right. And I've actually had clients tell me that I may be too honest to be successful in sales. And I will tell you today that if you've trusted me in the past to hold at some point, I am telling you right now that it is definitely the time to pull the trigger on solar. There's never and may never be a better time to invest in commercial solar than today. As we move through this presentation, I'll point to several reasons why this is now the case. So the first reason is incentives. As Clint mentioned, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed in August of 2022, and it's already made a major positive impact on solar investments in both the public and private sectors. Prior to August of 22, the inflation or the investment tax credit was pegged at 26%, and it was scheduled to sunset over the following 2 years. With the passage of the IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act, you now have access to a base 30% tax credit for all solar installations, and this can be expanded with these bonuses if you meet certain criteria. So there's a plus 10% adder for meeting domestic content requirements. There's another 10% for being sited in an energy community, and somewhere between 10 and 20% based on an adder, based on being in a low-income community or on Indian land. However, I do want to note that that low-income credit is based on an application and award process. So it's the only one of those adders that you have to apply for and be selected. So maybe similar to a grant in the public sector. So prior to the passage of this milestone, what really is milestone legislation, non-taxable entities also didn't have access to any of these incentives. So they were largely paying full dollar value on any solar investments and experiencing longer than usual paybacks. Now, there's a provision in the Inflation Reduction Act for direct payment of the ITC for qualifying non-taxable entities. So you can now claim a federal rebate check even if you don't have tax liability. If you are a taxable organization, on the other hand, you can also take advantage of the accelerated depreciation benefit, which is shown on this slide as well. But you want to note that this is going to be sunsetting. So if your solar asset is placed in service in 2024, 60% of that depreciation benefit is accelerated, and that falls to 40% if you turn that asset on in 2025. So timing does really matter if you're going to take advantage, if you're a taxable entity and you're going to be taking advantage of the accelerated depreciation. Now, the image in the middle of this slide demonstrates how these bonus credits can be stacked. So if the project checks all these boxes, you could technically receive up to 70% of your entire project cost paid for with federal tax dollars. On the right, we have a few additional state incentives, and the most relevant is the ability to net meter. We talked about this a little bit in prior web sessions, our prior webinars, but I'm going to dig a little bit deeper later into this presentation into this net metering and how it's not net billing and how that is a major deal, and also why that makes now a better time than ever to go ahead and move on an investment. So if I'm here telling you that now's the time to move fast, you're probably thinking, okay, but how do I move a project, fast enough in an illegally compliant manner through procurement so I don't miss this opportunity in this window of opportunity, right? And the answer may be through cooperative purchasing. Last year, we, AGT, submitted a response to a competitive solar solicitation that was issued by the Equalis Group. And after careful consideration, we were awarded this RS means-based contract last May. And this contract meets cooperative purchasing standards, which are sometimes referred to as piggybacking standards or criteria for all major governmental and non-governmental entities. A link to the AGT landing page is in the top of this slide. And once you get there, you can review all of the supporting documentation that was associated with this competitive solicitation and award. So piggybacking onto this Equalis contract will definitely expedite the procurement process for you, regardless of whether you're a governmental entity or not. So regardless of whether your organization requires that you piggyback onto another contract, this is definitely going to help justify and expedite the construction process for you. And this is new. We didn't have this available to you last year. We include this case study as an example of how cooperative purchasing can be combined with financial incentives to help government agencies expedite and expand their solar portfolio. In this instance, we were hired by Broward County to install 4 megawatts of solar across 13 sites, and they elected to piggyback on an existing AGT term contract. This allowed them to quickly deploy solar assets in a legally compliant manner, and they are currently evaluating several other expansion projects under the framework of our recent Equalis award. We're going to move on to a little bit of a utility review. But before we do, let's take a quick poll. So what was the average commercial base rate increase in Florida from 2021 to 2024? So utility base rate increase, exclusive of fuel charges or any of those other variable numbers. What do you think that was? I think we've got people cheating on these polls. Are we sending answers out in advance or what? So it looks like we've got quite a few responses. We got a lot of 15%. Looks like 30% is the most common answer here. And that's actually the correct answer, 30%. If we can move on to the next slide. So on the topic of utility escalation, let's dive a little deeper into the next driver that's making commercial solar projects more viable today than ever before. And this, I always say, this is one that tends to be overlooked. So on the left side of this page, you're going to see what's the most common rate structure in Florida. It's a GSD-1, General Services with Demand Rate Structure. And this is the published rate sheet from a major utility. So the time period we're looking at here, if you look at the top left, current rate, call that December of 2021 through, if you look on the right column, January of 2023. So we're looking at about a 13-month period here. Now, if we look at the increase, the percentage increase to these base rates across the board, this is what I always refer to as a silent killer. So people see their utility bills increasing and they automatically just assume that they're using more power, right? So they're taking energy consumption, or reduction measures, when in reality they're paying more for the power that they're consuming. So, but a lot of people will look at this and say, okay, well, big deal. My base charge per kilowatt hour was 2.21 cents 13 months ago. Now it's 2.885 cents. Like, we're still talking cents. So does it really matter, right? Well, it does matter when you look at it on a percentage basis. And just as an example, if you have a $65,000 annual power bill, that equates to a $20,000 operating expense headwind. And again, this does not include the temporary fuel escalation charges or any of these hurricane, recovery efforts that are being passed through that are, more temporary measures. This is just base rates. So you do need to keep an eye on this. And, in short, as your power costs are going up, the option of producing your own power with solar at a much lower cost on site becomes more attractive, right? So let's move on. So if you attended one of our presentations last year, this was a topic that we didn't cover. It was happening, but I would argue that the impacts weren't fully realized. So we didn't really understand what the outcome was going to be. Reality is that the record inflation and high interest rates that we're all experiencing in our daily lives are having a devastating impact, particularly on the residential solar market. Fortunately or unfortunately, the residential solar market has largely relied on cheap financing for years. Long terms, low interest rates, these were all used to create a scenario for homeowners where the savings associated with the solar investment outpaced their payment over the term, inclusive of finance charges. So deals that were, cash flow positive for a homeowner on day one were obviously very hard to refuse, right? Now, as rates have risen, this model doesn't pencil as well, and as a result, the residential market has slowed drastically across the United States. We're fortunate to be somewhat sheltered in the commercial space because our clients rarely rely on financing. But the truth is that this scenario in the residential market has resulted in what is arguably an opportunity for commercial solar investors. So what's the opportunity? Let's first back up a little bit. I want to revisit that topic of net metering versus net billing, right? I mentioned it earlier, and I mentioned it was a very big deal. So in the state of Florida, we still have access to traditional net metering. So in our case, we use a single meter that measures power in both directions, power going to the grid and power coming from the grid. We're then billed at the end of a month or a billing cycle based on whatever our net usage was during that period. A real simple example to think about, and I always use this one, is your home, right? So you're producing power during the day, you're not producing power at night. So in theory, in Florida, you could produce more power during the day than you actually need during the day, bank that on the grid, and then access it at night at no penalty, right? And meter credits are generally on a one-to-one basis in Florida. So that's a big, big benefit. Now, in contrast, let's look at net billing. So net billing measures power very differently. All power that's exported to the grid from your solar system is purchased by the utility at what's called avoided cost or a wholesale rate, while any and all power consumed from the utility, so like at night in my residential example, right, is charged to you at the full retail rate. So think 2 meters, right? One's measuring your exports and one's measuring your imports. The challenge is that the meter that's measuring your exports is at a much lower rate than what you're paying for the power to get it back at night. And you really don't need to imagine what the difference is here, because there's a case study happening right now as we speak in the state of California. So last year they migrated from net metering to net billing. And if you follow, solar news at all, you know what happened. The California residential market, which happens to be the largest in the country, screeched to a halt overnight. It really is a sad scenario. But as solar inventory levels skyrocketed due to the decreased demand, we're now seeing costs of solar modules at levels that we've never seen before, lower than we've ever seen before. We've actually have some clients right now that are making large forward buys on panels at unheard of prices, which is very positively impacting their financial returns. So there's 2 key takeaways, from this slide that support my opinion that there's never a better time than now. One being solar panels are cheaper than they've ever been. I mean, we've never seen prices like we're seeing right now. And two, if DeSantis hadn't vetoed House Bill 741 a year ago, this California case study that we're all looking at right now would have been a Florida case study. And your window of opportunity for solar could have potentially been largely closed. I personally believe utilities in Florida, like others around the nation, will continue to pursue net billing legislation in the future, and that's a real risk. So combined, if you're just looking at paybacks, what we're seeing today, standard flat roof, you're looking at probably a 3 to 5 year, break even on your investment, considering all the tax credits, considering the escalation on the utility side. All in probably a 3 to 5 year period. Solar parking structures, as Clint mentioned, there's a lot more cost there because, they're structurally, just a larger, more robust, solar installation. So a little longer there and largely dependent on scale, right? I mean, if we're doing 3 to 5 parking spots at a doctor's office, that's a much different financial scenario than, for example, the Verizon project that Clint outlined earlier. But in all cases, and I always like to highlight this scenario. I did it last year, and I'll do it again. And I always beat this drum. But if you're ever putting a roof on a commercial building, there's no better time to consider solar at the same time. So, if you get a payback on that incremental solar investment of 5 years, there's never a scenario where you're not also going to get or recover the cost of that roof as well within the combined warranty period of both assets, right? So your roof's going to come with a 20 to 25 year warranty. Your solar system's going to come with a 25-year warranty. Call it somewhere in year 10 for a taxable entity. And even if you're a school or a government entity, maybe it's year 15, but you're always going to recover the cost of that roof that is otherwise a sunk cost, right? So this is really a no-brainer anytime you're replacing a roof to also evaluate solar at the same time and combine those two investments. Moving on. One other scenario that I always like to highlight, huge deal, huge opportunity here. We call it the revenue model. So it applies to municipal governments, places where you pay to park. Maybe you pull up to the beach and you pull out your app and you pay, $3 an hour. Or maybe you're renting at a multifamily or apartment condo, renting on a monthly basis, a carport. Self-storage facilities, RV parking, huge deal right now. We're seeing that pop up all over Florida. And anywhere you want to offer, premier VIP parking. So think like at a stadium or an event venue, anywhere where you're generating income associated with the ability to park, right? There's an opportunity to generate incremental revenue with being able to park under a shaded structure. It keeps your car out of the sun and also produces power. So in the little chart there on the bottom right, you can see this is a cash flow for an actual project. It's in Central Florida, where the rental parking income, you can see that in, kind of the third column there, right? Like $60,000 dwarfs the savings even associated with the power generated from the solar on the top, right? So this is how you get into paybacks that are, 3 years and heavy, strong double-digit internal rates of return. This is just one of those very unique scenarios that I think applies to a lot of businesses that's often overlooked. And, the biggest question, obviously Advanced Green Technologies is, a division of the Advanced Roofing Organization. So kind of as Rob mentioned, largest commercial roofing contractor in the state, largest solar EPC in the state. The biggest question we always get is my roof going to leak? How many holes are you going to put in my roof? Do I have risk here? And it's really a trick question, So you can do this, you can install solar entirely the wrong way, as you see in some of these pictures, with the red squares around them. But there's also right ways to install solar that won't cause leaks in your roof. And as a matter of fact, they're all approved by the manufacturer. Um, as long as they're installed to the manufacturer's roofing standards, they'll actually issue you a warranty continuation certificate saying, hey, we've installed your solar installation and we agree that you have no additional risk. And here's a continuation rider associated with your roofing warranty, acknowledging that we, the manufacturer, approve your solar installation. So the correct answer is there's no risk associated with installing solar on a warranted roof. And as a matter of fact, we almost are always installing on a warranted roof because a lot of times those roofs that are in that 10 to 15 year, age range aren't great candidates, right? Because you don't want to put solar with a 25-year warranty on a roof that has maybe 5 to 10 years of useful life left. You have warranty misalignment, right? Um, so I just want to, we always like to show that just to kind of dispel any any rumors that, hey, my roof's going to leak or I'm going to have all these penetrations or issues. That's just not the case as long as you're working with a certified and professional roofing contractor as well. Moving on. So at this point, hopefully you're saying, okay, yeah, I get it, Matt. It sounds like it's time to move. What's next, right? I mean, how painful is this process going to be? And the answer is that it's painless. We can provide basic feasibility analysis like this over the phone. All we really need is your address. We need your roof condition. If you're considering rooftop solar, we need 12 months of power bills. And we need your corporate tax structure if you're wanting us to make depreciation calculations for you. With this basic information, we can give you these ballpark figures. And if these meet your sustainability and financial objectives, we would then proceed with an electrical site visit to develop a plan for the proper interconnection and provide you with a firm price, site-specific production model, and a full finance grade return on investment calculations. This entire process takes us approximately 2 to 3 weeks, but your cost throughout this is nothing. It's zero. And the last point I'll leave you with before we move on to a poll and kind of close up here and move on to Q&A. There's a strong case to be made for the cost of waiting, and I hate that term because it's so cliche, but I'll share a recent story, and I think that really makes this point. So we got a call, or I got a call from a client who we installed a sizable solar system for on a manufacturing facility about 3 years ago. And they contacted us because they had an inverter that went down. And when this inverter went down, they lost, about $8,000 in production. And they wanted us to mobilize immediately to correct the problem, which we did. In the same conversation, they're saying, hey, we are also considering adding solar to a second facility that we're bringing online right now. But we want to wait. We want to wait until we have everything. We have the plant completely online. We have all consumption so that we can fully understand what the savings opportunity looks like. And, what I think about when I think about this is, if you have one inverter down and you lose $8,000, if you have another plant that doesn't have the solar installed on it at this point, you're essentially losing, you're losing the entire system because you don't have it installed. So there is a real cost of waiting. And as utility costs increase, that becomes even more risky. And with the legislation, risk that may be out there as well. I think now's the time really to make a movement. So give us a ring if it's something that you're even considering. It costs you nothing, super easy, painless. We just need a few pieces of information to get this done for you. And I think we have one more pull here. And this was actually just covered on the last slide. So if you were performing a high-level feasibility analysis, how many DC watts of solar would you get per square foot approximately? And this poll
Thank
was
you,
in our,
Matt.
Yep. Go ahead, Clint.
Well, they're coming in. I think we're getting a bit of a mixed bag of responses, but 10, 20, 44, 10's in the early lead right now. But that was a great presentation and covered a lot of ground. We do have a handful of Q&A questions that have come in throughout the term of the project. But Matt, you want to give the final answer here?
Yep, 10 watts a square foot is kind of the average that we see on a flat roof. 18 if it's mounted flush. So
Yeah, and that comes with a big qualifier. That includes inter-row spacing for rooftops. That includes some allowance for the wind zones in the perimeter and the fire setbacks, and standard HVAC penetration. So we're using a lot of historical know-how there. But if you actually look at a solar panel itself, the solar panels, modern solar technology with current efficiencies are somewhere in the 20 to 22 watts a square foot coming out of the panel themselves. But in real world application is 10. So anyways, thank you, Matt, and really appreciate all that information. Ron had asked, do you guys run into issues with factory mutual or other insurance related issues? And we have an extensive portfolio of factory mutual insured assets that we've built, and they do bring a higher level of scrutiny to the engineering designs. They do tend to drive some costs associated with higher criteria on wind speeds, more mechanical attachments, different orientations, but it's not ever been anything we haven't been able to work through. So while they may demand that we go above and beyond Florida building code and current code requirements, we're able to get past it. I think, when I look at our portfolio, we've built two extremely large carports for Lockheed Martin at 2.5 megawatts apiece, both FM Global insured. JM Family Enterprises, Southeast Toyota, one of our largest corporate customers, and we probably have 12 installations varying from rooftop to parking garages on their sites, all FM approved. And I could go on and on. Most recently, we just finished that megawatt KPMG roof, and they were FM insured. The one thing I will say is FM looks at every client's risk profile differently. So they don't really follow a prescriptive equation to what it means on how the project's going to be looked at. They have design standards, but then their engineers will actually look at the use case of the building, the critical nature. Is it a distribution center or is it a retail outlet? What is their deductible profile? So they really look at it on a case by case basis, and a little less prescriptive than like their roofing may be, which we're also well versed in. Eric had asked for residential applications, pole mounted solar versus roof mounted solar. Any comments? Eric, I don't really have a comment here. Here at AGT, we're 100% focused on the commercial and industrial space. We really don't do any residential applications at all. Even when Rob or myself want solar on our homes, I try to stay away from it. It's just not what we're geared towards. Let me see what else had come up. I know there was some rooftop questions. Eric again had asked, can solar mate with backup generator power systems? Yeah, the answer is yes. The long answer is it's extremely complicated and a really sophisticated controller to do that. But right now at our microgrid sites for the Seminole Tribe, we are integrating the DSE controller software with our solar controller software to be able to activate and dispatch generators as needed. So it can be done. It is not a typical situation, but in the residential world, I know your previous comment was residential related. Generac has made a large investment into the solar space and continues to operate there as well. So where do we send our CAM info? Tatiana, do we have the QR code today, or are we just putting CAM info into the chat?
That's on the last slide.
It will be the last slide. They can email to my email address.
All right. Has the reduced UV impact on roof membrane provided by the shade from solar panels been shown to extend the roof membrane life? I can take this one. I believe it absolutely does. The issue is it's only limited to those areas covered by solar, and we know that on a rooftop, at a minimum, 20% of the roof will not be covered by solar. So while the UV is certainly limited in those areas, it's not everywhere. So I don't believe that you really get a system benefit. The one thing I will say is when the roof is covered by solar, one major benefit that we see is you now have taken foot traffic off of that roof as well. And being in the roofing industry for my entire life, I can tell you that unwanted foot traffic and excessive foot traffic in areas that aren't designed for foot traffic are a concern for the longevity of the system, whether it's degradation of the insulation packages that are underneath it, punctures of the roof system, these things that happen. And by having rooftop solar up there, we generally end up with very well defined walkway paths where you can have proper protection from walkways or secondary membrane layers to give you that protection. So you get the benefit of keeping the UV off of the roof. That's a fact. I don't know of any actual studies that can say, hey, it's going to extend it by X or Y. But you also get this secondary effect of really corralling rooftop traffic where you want it and where the roof's designed to handle it. And it's just another reason that really we don't look at solar as a negative add to a roof system. By the time you really kind of put all of this into play, there's a lot of benefits to rooftop solar and the performance of the roof over time. Chet had asked, what is the life of batteries and solar panels? So here at AGT, we work really exclusively with tier 1 product. Tier 1 on the solar panel side really means that they've been rated by Bloomberg, New Energy Finance, and they've been deemed to be a financeable product. And that rating is really based on how many projects have been deployed in the last quarter, that had bank financing behind them. So the underwriters looked at the product and deemed it to be of a quality that they would underwrite it for a period of time. And we really only work with tier 1 providers. Almost every tier 1 provider in the commercial and industrial space today warranties the product for 25 years. That's a power production warranty for 25 years at 80%, or even sometimes now 85% of its original capacity. So if that's a 400-watt solar panel, 80% of that's 320 watts. That's what it would be guaranteed to produce after 25 years. Is how that works on the solar panels. Batteries typically are coming with a 10-year warranty, but they're always designed based on their number of cycles that they're able to take from what we call full state of charge to their minimum thresholds, which is usually 10 or 20% state of charge in their cycles. So twofold answer there. I see storage. We got some storage folks. We're doing an enormous amount in the storage industry. Matt will get with you offline. He's actually handling a portfolio of projects of ours. It's over 60 rooftops right now in the storage space. You guys are amazing use cases because you have generally low expenses outside of power, and you generally have clear, clean rooftops. So we would love to talk to you, Lori. If you could, I assume we have your email, but if not, we'll reach out. So we appreciate that. Otherwise, there has been an email posted in the chat to contact Tatiana at tatianaL@advancedroofing.com, and she will register you for your CAM credits and get you everything you need to get set up. Last and certainly not least, we talked about these air tags, kids, keys, other valuables, whatever you want. Just don't end up in the news for tracking somebody that doesn't want to be tracked. But the QR code, scan the QR code, will get you in the raffle and choose somebody. Ron just asked solid states projects. Now, I mean, everything we're doing right now is lithium. Ron, to answer your question, so we're not working in any solid state batteries right now, but be interesting to see where this battery technology goes over the next 5, 10, 20 years. I think it's hard to tell where the winner is, but right now most of the mainstream projects in the CNI space are using lithium. Upcoming webinars to close you out. I think Rob mentioned this earlier, but we would love to have you rooftop safety if you're a property manager and in the mindset of mitigating risk and keeping your people safe. Rooftop safety's a great webinar to come learn about how we're able to deploy simple solutions to access points, maintenance points, etc. 319, our ramp roof asset management technology, which is advanced access tips. 49, 10 things property managers need to know, and then 521, which is always intentionally done right here in May, hurricane season preparedness. So please come join us, and we look forward to having you. And that's it for today. No other questions. We can wrap up.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.